Parliamentary State Secretary Bartler, Director General Dr. Forvik, Dr. Meyer, Dr. Ogilvy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you so much for following the invitation of the Alliance for Trade Facilitation to this high-level forum entitled Rethinking Trade Facilitation. My name is Natasha Walker, and I'm very proud and happy to be accompanying these 2.5 hours. Trade facilitation is a sort of a silver lining on the cloud of trade discussions. I've just come back from England, no further talk on that. And so I'm really looking forward to an exciting day today. It's going to be a day where experts from politics and from business have the opportunity of exchanging on challenges, but also on solutions for trade facilitation. But before we come to the interaction, let's really make sure that we have insights and inspiration from the political side of the trade facilitation dialogue and also the business side, with 3 short keynote addresses. And after that, we will be having a very interactive podium with your contributions, I hope, too. So with no further ado, I would like to invite you, Parliamentary State Secretary Norbert Bartler from the Federal Ministry for Economic Development and Cooperation, to take the floor. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Natasha Walker, for this friendly introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ogilvy, I'm really delighted to welcome you to the first high-level forum of the German Alliance of Trade Facilitation here in the Museum of Communication in Berlin, a really wonderful location. The venue of our meeting is quite fitting. For communication, the process by which information is exchanged between individuals, even over long distances and across frontiers, is a basic human need and a key precondition for our modern way of life. And trade, too, is a form of communication or at least exchange. And in fact, it is a vital requirement for economic activity and prosperity in our ever more interconnected world. And in recent times, however, this idea of trade as a key aspect of human interaction, as a necessary requirement for the development of individuals, businesses, and nations, has been pushed further and further into the background. The term trade has become an object of heated ideological and political debate. Today, we even speak of trade wars. But we here in this room all have in common that we want to facilitate trade, and we want to do this in a way that will serve people and facilitate fair exchange. For us at the BMZ, a fair system of world trade is one of the main pillars of our development policy. Such a system is vital if we want to realize the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development or even our Marshall Plan with Africa. And a recent study carried out in Ghana has shown very clearly that the greater the number of businesses, especially small and medium-sized ones, engaging in export and international trade, the greater the number of jobs that can be created, and the higher the wages that can be paid. Small and medium-sized enterprises in Ghana that have managed to expand into export markets were able to increase the employment they can offer by 15%. A precondition, however, is that all businesses have the opportunity to participate in international trade, and that everyone benefits from the resultant increase in levels of prosperity. To achieve this, it is extremely important to dismantle trade barriers. Non-tariff barriers, in particular, are a considerable hindrance to cross-border trade. In fact, a study carried out by German's Ifo Institute has found that over the past decade, non-tariff barriers have been responsible for around 16% of lost global trade. And trade barriers such as complex customs regimes or practices that are not transparent and therefore prone to corruption are especially hard on many developing countries and emerging economies. And high transaction costs make it difficult for domestic firms to access global markets. On the other hand, there is little incentive for international companies to invest and therefore create jobs in a country where the business and investment climate is unfavorable. That is why facilitation export opportunities for local businesses and streamlining customs procedures in developing countries and emerging economies is an important adjustment which can help enhance economic development. And we all know that a shipping container held up by customs authorities for 3 weeks or even more is costly. Flows of goods are the lifeblood of a globalized world. And if the free flow is obstructed, there is a danger for the system seizing up and collapsing. This is where the Alliance for Trade Facilitation comes on. Alliance members work together to lower trade costs by helping to simplify and speed up customs procedures. And we have found partners around the world, as many countries have come to realize what added value our alliance can deliver. For instance, we are currently engaged in a collaborative project with Indonesia's Ministry of Trade and will soon be taking on similar projects with Thailand and Ukraine, for example. And the projects we have completed show us that the alliance approach works. Thus, for example, reforms initiated in Montenegro and Serbia have helped to cut down the amount of time needed for customs clearance, and in fact, the number of express deliveries clearing customs within an hour has more than doubled, from formerly 25% to around 55%. We want this example to serve as a model which can be copied elsewhere, and we want to continue to expand the Alliance activities and to try out new innovative approaches. Introducing digital technology can be extremely effective here. That is why we are currently working on developing an integrated blockchain solution to help Morocco's customs authorities determine the tariff value of goods. This will bring transparency to customs procedures and foster trust in the system among all those involved. This is because the parties concerned, in other words, customs officers, traders, and third-party logistic providers, can access data relating to shipments of goods and can process this data in a system that is open to scrutiny and easy to understand. This not only makes the customs clearance process easier, but also acts as an effective deterrent to corruption and illegal trading. This is state-of-the-art development cooperation, but we cannot do it by ourselves, nor do we want to. That is why, when the Alliance for Trade Facilitation was set up in 2016, it was designed right from the outset to, involve multiple actors. Companies, associations, and government institutions from Germany and our partner countries are working together to remove bureaucratic obstacles and realize the World Trade Organization's Trade Facilitation Agreement. Germany's alliance is active wherever the interests of German, international and local businesses and governments coincide in a given partner country. And the aim is always to create added value for everyone, added value that will benefit people generally. More than 40 companies are already actively involved in the alliance. Mobilizing and getting the private sector involved is crucial if the alliance is to work. The huge knowledge that businesses have of the ins and outs of trade practices and customs procedures is invaluable when it comes to implementing such trade facilitation measures. And if I may say so with a nod to you, Mr. Olgevi, as a member of the DHL Management Board, that is why the support of companies like Deutsche Post, DHL, is so very important. I would like to thank you, especially for making today's event in this beautiful venue possible. The theme of today's meeting is Rethinking Trade Facilitation. This is meant as an invitation to all the partner countries, businesses, industry federations, public institutions, and the many other actors with whom we work to come up with and try out new solutions and to develop them further as we go along. The German Alliance for Trade Facilitation offers a suitable framework for this. And in fact, the Alliance brings together German and international businesses and the strength they have to offer with representatives of businesses and politics from partner countries. I am happy to see such successful working relationships, and I'm grateful for the committed work that many of you are doing in the projects being implemented by the Alliance. By working together, we are making a major contribution to sustainable development. To those of you who haven't taken the plunge yet, I should like to say, make use of this opportunity. Tell us about your own experiences with complex and drawn-out customs procedures and non-transparent processes. Then work with us and our competent partners to provide innovative solutions to the problems you have experienced. Get involved in the projects being carried out by the Alliance, or help to initiate new reform measures. Africa, in particular, is a continent of opportunity, as my minister always says, and I too. And the same goes for trade there. The African Free Trade Zone that is currently in the making could give a whole new momentum to economic activity on the continent, pushing it forward and creating a huge new market. We here in Germany, in Europe, must not miss such a historic development. As far as trade facilitation in Africa is concerned, we still have a lot of work to do. But together, we can and will meet this challenge. And I look forward to the new solutions we may develop here in today's event. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you very much for the solutions you may find. Thank you.
Thank you very much for getting us all on board and reminding us of the timeliness of this alliance, but also of its effectiveness across the boundaries of public-private, but also as a global initiative. Let's now hear from a partner ressort in the Federal Ministry of the Economic Affairs and Energy. And with us today is Dr. Christian Vorwijk, who is a Director General in the Ministry. And it's always been wonderful in the Alliance to see the Bundesregierung working together in unison and really being a great partner, I think, for all of the private sector companies who've been involved. So please, your keynote.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bartel, Mr. Ogilvy, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Minister of Economic Affairs, let me also welcome you to this high-level forum on trade facilitation in Berlin. It is a pleasure for me to join you for this opening session. For the very first time, this forum brings together many important stakeholders, from the German federal government, business associations, economic operators, and project partners. Take a look at the real challenges in this area and to grasp opportunities. On this occasion of this speech, I would like to make 2 points as to why trade facilitation is so important from our perspective. My first point is about trade facilitation as such. My second point is a more general term. My first point concerns trade facilitation agreement. This agreement is a real milestone in our view. It was agreed at the WTO, the World Trade Organization conference in Bali, 2013, and came into force just 2.5 years later, February 2017, when 2/3 of the WTO member states ratified it. To date, some 145 member states out of 164 in the WTO ratified this agreement, so this is a very big success. The aim of the agreement is to simplify customs procedures in international trade for imports, transits, the exports of goods to make them easier and faster. It will reduce bureaucracy and costs for both economic operators and custom administrations. This is in the interest of all countries that depend on global trade, regardless of their development status. Several studies have identified the enormous potential so far. Mr. Bartel mentioned it. If the agreement were to be implemented in its entirety, we would save 10% of the entire trade costs in developed countries and 16% in developing countries. Let me give you a little example at this point. This is called Rethinking Trade Facilitation. When the notion of trade facilitation came up during the Doha round negotiations, I remember talking to an expert from the World Bank who told me how customs procedures were made in African countries, in developing countries, neighboring countries, where trucks had to wait about 3 weeks to get customs procedures. This is a long time ago. Now we are in a different stage here, but this is because trade facilitation came into work and finally this agreement came. Today we are seeing this clear progress when it comes to the implementation. Developing countries have implemented 90% of the TFA, the Trade Facilitation Agreement, and at least developed countries 67% already. This is very encouraging in our view, but in terms of making full use of the potential, we're not quite yet there. Further efforts are still needed. To gain an overview of where individual countries, perhaps your countries, stay, I would like to encourage you to have a look at the OECD database, there where you can look on country by country where they stay on trade facilitation and what was done in the last years. This website, it's not the only website on trade facilitation, there are others as well, and very good websites on the GSAT, the WTO and so on, but this website shows very much where different countries are. Of course, for many countries, the immense work involved in trade facilitation cannot be done without external assistance. Some 70 countries, developing countries, have signaled and notified to the WTO that they need certain assistance to implement the trade facilitation agreement so that they can take advantage of these opportunities. The German federal government stands ready to promote such assistance. This is an example of it here. When it comes to implementation, it is essential to have the private sector on board. Enterprises have a great deal of knowledge about customs procedures in specific foreign markets. Their knowledge can contribute substantially to identify major obstacles and to addressing these efficiently and as needed through dedicated projects. This is why our ministries, the Ministry of Economic Affairs and the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, have launched the National Alliance of Trade Facilitation. Under the guidance of the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, the GIZ, the members of the National Alliance work together with the Global Alliance on respective projects. It was mentioned South Africa, Argentina, and I think it was mentioned Indonesia. One of the first projects has already been successfully concluded, Montenegro, Serbia, where the number of express shipments released within 1 hour of their arrival has been doubled. The result demonstrates the concrete and potential of approving this work in partnership. Indeed, there is an enormous level of interest currently being seen in trade facilitation. More and more stakeholders at international and national level, both public and private, are getting involved. This is where the much valued work of the WTO Secretariat as a dedicated coordinator of the respective contributions comes into play, and we are grateful for both of these things. My second point is a more general perspective. It has to do with the WTO as such, with the multilateral system. Germany strongly adheres to a rules-based multilateral system, with the WTO and its 164 member states at its core. Rules agreed at the WTO provide reliability for business, predictability, and the transparency needed by our business communities. They are the basis for global value chains, for business decisions, and even later for investment. In our current times, when the WTO system is facing increased criticism by some of the member states and being increasingly called into question, it becomes very important to show that multilateral cooperation based on common understanding delivers good results. If the WTO system is to survive, new issues have to be addressed urgently. We have to develop this system. There are issues like e-commerce, digital trade, subsidies, rules on transparency, just some of the topics I'd like to mention here. In all this ongoing discussion we currently have with member states, also including those that are very critical of this system, the agreement on trade facilitation is one of the most powerful arguments, in our view, in favor of the WTO system. Indeed, it is the only agreement, multilateral agreement, which has been concluded since the founding of the WTO in 1995. And we expect for the future, ideally, more trade facilitation agreements. We are looking now for plurilateral approaches because this is perhaps the one and only. My last remark concerns the National Alliance itself. I would particularly like to thank those business associations and enterprises that have already joined the National Alliance and that are here with us today. We appreciate your commitment. The Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy will continue to actively support this process. It is a pleasure to see that alliance growing, and we would like to see it grow even further. This is why today I would like to encourage more entrepreneurs to become members of the National Alliance. Let me invite you to take an active role in this work. It's definitely worth it and offers real win-win opportunities. To finish, I would like to wish you a fruitful exchange, a lively discussion, and of course, many successful projects that are of mutual benefit of all stakeholders involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And as we can see, the Alliance has certainly got its work cut out for it. There's a lot that we can still be doing. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a sort of political perspective of where the Alliance fits in, where it's coming from. And we've heard from both of our political representatives how important the collaboration with the private sector is. And the Alliance is growing, but one of the initial members was obviously Deutsche Post and DHL. We've heard a lot about that already. And so it is now over to you, Dr. Thomas Ogilvie, to please give us an understanding of what your perspective is on this alliance. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Dear Mr. Bartle, dear participants, let me first and foremost welcome you in this beautiful building. It's a pleasure and honor for us to host you here in our Museum for Communication for Post and Telecommunication. And I can invite you also, after the event, to take a view around and see the great exhibition. But today, we are centered around this space. And what probably not all of you know is that this space in this neoclassicistic building cites and quotes an architectural highlight of old Greek architecture, a central space, what was called the agora, the place where citizens come together, debate, exchange, where jurisdiction takes place, but also trade. So this is a central place, and Homer said once, if there is a city without an agora, then this is a city of injustice, a city that cannot freely develop. And I think when we talk about rethinking trade facilitation, these are hints from the past that can help us to unmantle and discover the essence of what we are talking about. First and foremost, public-private partnership. Like in the agora in the ancient time, where citizens, free men, free women came together with representatives of the polis, of the city, and interchanged and exchanged for the mutual benefit of the city. It's the same more in the global agora now, where enterprises and authorities need to come together to develop the world for a better mean. And that's something where we as Deutsche Post DHL Group see on the one hand side an obligation to act in the right way as a global corporate citizen. But of course, and that is not to be neglected, there's a selfish economic interest in this, because the better trade is facilitated, the better are the prospects for us as the global logistics company for the world. But talking now about trade and bringing it into perspective to the analogy of the agora, this central place was the place where trust happened, where people could trust in the way how you exchange. And that's something where we could say even today that trade equals trust in many senses. So let me give you one example about it. When we talk about trade as the trust or belief that there is a better tomorrow, something of utmost importance, in particular for the emerging countries. And when we think about Africa, and Africa is also very close to the activities of our company, we talk about more than 1 billion people today and more than 2 billion people tomorrow, meaning in about 30 years, who have only one hope for a better tomorrow, which is built on trade. If we talk about trade as a source for learning and development based on exchange, then it is all about trust. When we talk about how can prosperity and growth, and by that also political stability, evolve, then it is about interconnectedness, then it is about having the opportunity to trade and exchange with others. And of course, when we talk about the big challenges that are ahead of us today, climate change and migration, then again, the exchange of knowledge, the exchange of technology, and giving a perspective to people that you can make a living and have a worthy life in the place where you live to avoid migration. So trade is pretty much around trust. But, as in the past, and we talked about it before, trust needs to be protected every day. How can we protect trust? First and foremost, by ensuring balance and fairness. And that's why the agreement of trade facilitation is so important, because it creates the fundament for balance and fairness between 145 countries. But it's also important to ensure compliance and integrity, which is, and I know what I'm talking about with all the compliance processes that we have in place, the fundament that you have a proper conduct, the avoidance of misbehaviors. To protect trade, we also need multilateralism, because like in a global network that we operate as a logistics company, the value of the network increases exponentially by the participating members. And that cannot be achieved by individual agreements, but only by multilateral agreements. And last but not least, it can be ensured by predictable and reliable processes, where it is all about how can we ensure, based on know-how transfer, that in all the countries that participate, we have the know-how and the technology in place to have efficient and reliable processes. So what can we do collectively and individually? And I want to highlight 3 aspects. First, I think we need to be clear and vocal what we are to do. But we also need to be lenient and respectful with the pace and the speed of our partners. Some are faster, some are not so fast. And that's something where we need to make offers. And whenever these offers are taken, we need to provide resources. Secondly, it's about setting industry standards, because standards are the basis for scaling and leverage. And again, in the logistics industry, all great innovations of the last century are built on standards. The sea freight container was the prerequisite for globalization. Without the standardization of the sea freight container and the Euro pallet on road transportation, globalization would not have happened that way. And now in the digital world, we need to transfer and translate these principles of standardization into the digital twin of trade, the information flows. That's something that we can do together here in the Alliance of Trade Facilitation, but also individually. And thinking back of the history of DHL, DHL was founded 50 years ago by 3 gentlemen in San Francisco. And they made a little bit of a shortcut for trade as well, because they took the custom clearance papers and flew them from San Francisco to Honolulu, so that although there was no World Wide Web in 1969 back then, customs clearance could happen faster, and by that we had better transit times and less waste. And that's something where it is about innovativeness and innovation in enterprises. So that's what brings us together here. And to close with my perspective on the role of the Trade Facilitation Agreement and us in the Alliance. So I think a political agreement can create a constitution by rules and perhaps by laws. But how to operationalize it, how to bring it to life, needs to be done jointly with the practitioners, with the enterprises. And the examples we heard of, and we will discuss later on, if it is in Montenegro, if it is in Ghana, are great examples how we can operationalize political thought and political will. And the second aspect is, it is about having a truly multi-stakeholder debate. Because like the network of a global trade collaboration evolves, we also need to bring in the different perspectives. And therefore, I appreciate very much to see you all together here today in this joint effort to make the next contribution to trade facilitation. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Thomas, and thank you for asking us into this wonderful agora. And I'm sure we will make good use of it. Let's get started. I have a panel of experts that I will invite to the stage, and they will be my starting point for an interactive discussion with a lot of members of the audience and hopefully a lot of those of you who perhaps didn't know you were going to speak, so we can have a very open use of this agora. Let me first of all invite my panelists, please, to the stage. Dr. Stefan Meyer is member of the executive board of the Federation of German Industries, BDI. Welcome. And Thomas Ogilvy, if you would please take the seat next to Dr. Meyer. Then we would like, obviously, to hear from the horse's mouth as to what these projects actually mean in the countries that they're being implemented in. So Stoyanka Milosevic is here. She is the head of the department at the Montenegrin Customs. Welcome. And she will also be joined by a colleague from the Ukraine. Denis Gutenko is acting commissioner for the State Fiscal Services. Welcome. And we've been hearing such good praise of the WTO, and so it is very fit that the WTO should also be part of this panel. Alejandro Gamboa Alda is secretary to the WTO Council for Trade in Goods. Welcome, Alejandro. And you may be wondering who this chair is for. Well, it's for me as well, but it's also for our microphone to involve as many of you who would like to use it. So don't go to sleep, because you may get hit on the head by it. So that gives us the opportunity to really make sure that we have a lively discussion. But before I come to the panel, perhaps you'd allow me just to give us all an idea of who we're talking to in the audience. So it's basically a question of who's here. Could I just please ask, first of all, who's here from representing Germany in one form or another? German government, German industry, German associations. So we have, as is expected, a lot of very different organizations, but from Germany. Who's representing an organization within Europe? And you may put your hand up several times if you're... Thank you very much. OK, thank you. What about rest of world? There is a rest of world outside Europe. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming all this way, because as we've heard, the Alliance is a global initiative. Let's ask another question. So do we have people from industry and business? Yes, so that's about half of the people sitting in this room. And we heard there's already 40 companies on board, but room for many more as well in the Alliance. Who's representing government organizations, national government organizations, and administration? OK. What about other levels of government and state organizations? Let's go global. What about regional, local? OK, so we're staying on a national level. That's good. Let me ask you a couple of questions relating to how urgent this issue is for you. This is going particularly to the people who are from the private sector. How many of you have problems related to trade barriers other than tariff barriers? Could you just raise your hand? Is this an issue for you? Yes, thank goodness. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, I suppose. Right? But it's a pressing issue. How many of those who just raised their hand said, well, but we're here basically to just showcase what we're doing because we've got it all entirely under control? No one. OK, we've heard already there's a lot that we still need to be innovating on and working and scaling together. Thank you. So we have a little bit of a better idea who's here, and I think we can start our panel discussion. I've split it into 4 chapters. The first, I think it's important to say what are those barriers and have more of a feeling for the barriers themselves. Then actually go into a little more detail on the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement to make sure we're all on the same page. Then we've heard before that no agora would be complete if we didn't have multi-sectoral, multi-actor relations. Thank you so much, Parliamentary State Secretary. Let's give a round of applause to the BMZ. Thank you. So we'll have the 3rd chapter on those multi-actor partnerships, and the final chapter is looking forward, particularly at the digital solutions that we've already heard about from Thomas. So let me start with the trade barriers themselves, and I'll come and sit down with my panel. Stefan Meyer, if I could start with you, yes, feel free to take a microphone. I'm only throwing this at the people in the audience. So many companies that you've been talking to, large, small, who are involved in the association, presumably feel these crucial barriers. Can you explain some of them to us?
Yeah, I think this is really a usual complaint we get from many companies when we talk about them. With them, why don't you, for example, invest in African countries? Why don't you trade with African countries more and less? We have a lot of anecdotal evidence what kind of problems, especially in the field of import licensing, export licensing, custom procedures can be seen. We have many roadblocks still in many countries, informal roadblocks sometimes. So we got a lot of this anecdotal evidence, but I can also refer to a really major study quite recently released by the Global Perspectives Initiative, based on a survey done by Allensbach, in which they found out that corruption and legal uncertainty are the major impediments for German industry to invest in Africa. And I think this is obvious, and here the agreement and certainly also the Alliance for Trade Facilitation can help a lot to improve this, and to improve it.
If we're looking at what companies are willing and excited in engaging in themselves, what sort of solutions do you think we should be scaling up most urgently or most importantly? What sort of solutions are exciting and attractive?
I think there's already was referred to. We are talking about harmonization of standards and regulations. Right. That's very important. To simplify procedures is also very important. And here I think we also have to deal with the fear that harmonization always means to harmonize to a lower level. This is not what we really would like to have. We would like to have a high level of harmonization. We would like to have a transparent and accountable manner in which these regulations are applied. And I think this is certainly a field a lot is to do.
You focused, as Norbert Bartler did too, very much on Africa. Is this a worldwide problem, these worldwide barriers, or are we seeing different ones depending on the regions we're in?
I think it's a worldwide problem, but I think it's very much a problem which exists in Africa, because here the markets are more fragmented. When you look at the markets there, they are quite small in size. So trade procedures and trade impediments and non-tariff barriers are more prevalent there because the markets are very fragmented. So you have to do, as an investor or a company who wants to do trade with Africa, you have to cross borders several times to have a sizable market. And I think this is certainly a problem.
Very specific for Africa itself. Thank you so much. Let's ask one of our colleagues from one of the companies who's very involved in Africa. Rita Nkulu, you're here from Siemens in South Africa, Executive Director for Business Excellence at Siemens. And perhaps I could ask you to be my first catcher. And if you can speak right into it and give us an idea of how the non-tariff barriers are affecting your business and what sort of solutions you come up with to deal with that. Thank you.
So from a Siemens perspective, we have our hub majority in South Africa. And even though we have a hub in South Africa, we procure goods from India, China, and so on. And in particular from India and China, the challenge is to bring goods, let's say, into Uganda is one thing, but with it you also have to bring in the services for that. So while South Africa and the engineers in South Africa may be quite far along, there are certain equipments that cannot be installed just yet in terms of the knowledge that has been transferred by Africans. So therefore, we need to also then import the services. So the challenge that we have is not so much the goods themselves always. Yes, you need certificates of conformance, but I think that's a hang we have already. The challenge is to get the engineers to also come in time. And my question here is that something that can also be handled by the trade facilitation? Because it doesn't help to have goods and then the engineers are held up somewhere else.
Okay, so this is a question that you have, and I think we're probably going to leave this this conference today, this high-level forum, with a lot of questions that we're going to give to the Alliance as well to answer. Does anyone spontaneously, either on my panel or in the audience, have an answer to that? Do you want to catch, Alejandro? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, indeed, the agreement on trade facilitation as such does not refer to the investment measures. But we in the WTO, we have the TRIMS agreement, the Trade-Related Investment Measures Agreement, on which you can rely and you can bring the issue to the attention of the rest of the WTO membership in order to highlight these aspects and perhaps get into consultations and lobby, being you part of the private sector, with the German authorities, so as for them to also lobby here in Germany, but also in the capital in Uganda or in South Africa, as to see how they can solve this issue.
Thank you. Again, going back to the importance of working together and having more of that joint advocacy. Now, I've got a job for you, Alejandro. If you could throw the catch box to Axel Weigel, who is a part of the alliance from Krones, which is a German packaging organization or company. Sorry, and you've also been part of the alliance since day one. So what sort of barriers do you think everybody should be aware of when it comes to getting your goods to markets such as Africa, but maybe also further afield?
Yes, thank you. We are a company for the beverage and liquid food industry. So we produce huge machines, lines, plants. Some of our plants can produce fill more than 60,000 bottles an hour, water bottles, for example. And, but our customers, they do not really just rely that we can bring in the machines and the plants, which is normally not a big customs issue, but they also rely that we keep the machines running. And then we need spare parts. And sometimes these spare parts, they need import licenses, they need other documents, they need certificates. And some of these non-tariff trade barriers, they lead to that we cannot import them, that we buy them locally. But some of these parts, we only need maybe once a month, once a year, or even more seldom. So it's not really possible for us to build up a supplier base for that in every country. So we must rely on that it's possible that we can also import our spare parts and not only the machines and plants and lines. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, I'm going to throw it back to you. Could you just give us a little bit of an understanding of the differences, perhaps, in the barriers you're facing in the African continent compared to some of the other countries?
Yes, we can see in Africa that it's also a lot of related on the duties they can receive, and also in Africa we can see that theoretically, there could be some advantages, like the East African community, but practically, it's not possible to use them, and that's really a pity because we would like to have a hub in Kenya. We also have a lot of service technicians in Kenya. We also have a training center there, so we have people getting trained there that they can maintain our machines. But it's not really possible to use it as a hub, that they can maybe go to Ethiopia and maintain the machines there. Also because if we get in the goods into Kenya first and want to re-export them, then we pay the duties twice because this East African customs union is not really working as it should be. If we see the same situation in Thailand, it's way better there. We have a hub and we can import to a free zone and we can just store it there for a while and re-export it to other locations in Southeast Asia. But there we can see also other problems, especially in Thailand, and that's why we're looking forward to the project, is the tariff code topic. It's standardized, it's harmonized, and that's a good thing for trade everywhere in the world, and also Thailand has the same rules than everywhere else. But if you import it, we see that the customs officers in Thailand, they always have different opinions about every part than all other places in the world. And we can see normally the opinion is about to raise higher duties. But that's not only the one point that you have to pay higher duties. The more problem for us is that it's our hub and they should ship the goods to other places in Southeast Asia. And then you have documents with different tariff codes, and then you would have even more problems on the next border.
Thank you.
That's why we're really looking forward to the project.
Right, and thanks so much, and I'll take that box back from you again. Thank you. And I think, Stefan, this actually shows how important it is to listen to the stories of the companies involved, because it can be something very specific to that company, to that market, and this is what the Alliance seems to be achieving. Are you confident?
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And, I think...
Sorry.
What really came out also from the comments is that technical standards can be very important non-tariff barriers, and non-tariff barriers are sometimes more important than tariffs, because tariffs are only applied once when a product crosses a border, but non-tariff barriers can be really applied several times along the value chain, and so I think it's really important to deal with the standards and regulations and with this non-tariff barriers.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the barriers are out there. The barriers are perhaps even getting more complex. There's a need for us to work on projects to actually come to the bottom of it and create solutions. Let's have a closer look now in our second round on what's the framework that we're actually working in with the Alliance, the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, and also particularly looking at the C notification countries. Denis Gutenko, Ukraine has been working intensely to reduce non-tariff trade barriers. What does the actual trade facilitation agreement mean for Ukraine, and how you actually implement measures?
Hello, thank you for invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here. And a couple of words about Ukraine and implementation. We ratified this trade facilitation agreement in 2015. In 2017, it came into force. Then we established a National Council for Trade, and it's a very high-level council. And within the council, we have working groups, and one of the working groups is devoted purely to implementation of this agreement. So there are Ministry of Economy as a head of this group, Ministry of Infrastructure, Energy, State Fiscal Service, and State Service of Safety Goods, Food Safety and Consumer Protection, and of course private sector representatives. So, and one more formal step, we adopt just in July 2019, the action plan of implementation of this agreement with a concrete dates, concrete responsible persons. Mm-hmm. So we think that we're moving quite fast. But after that, we have new parliament, new president, new government, and new head of tax and customs. Mm-hmm. So we are now in transition period, and now we hope then within maybe weeks we will adopt new laws about authorized economic operators, about transit system. So we are moving quite fast in this. And by the way, I want to add about this non-tariffs barriers. So previously I was a part of the business sector, so I know how was the burden is.
You felt the pain.
Yes, we felt a lot. Then I worked in Ministry of Economy. So and we personally we cancel some licenses, export-import licenses, permits. We simplified export of services. We changed our currency law. So it was our business suffered a lot from currency regulations in Ukraine, but we're simplifying step by step. And now, working in a state fiscal service, we know exactly what to do with this non-tariff and tariff even barriers. And I think we have such a window of opportunity in Ukraine right now that we have never had before.
But we're seeing the need that with the new government, we're going to have to get people on board and the agenda actually adopted by the new people who are holding office.
Yes, but this topic, customs and simplifying and solving all the issues about this custom, is one of the top priorities of new president.
Okay.
So we don't have any chance.
And are you confident that the public-private interplay that we've seen here in the National Alliance in Germany, that will also be at the core of the Ukrainian efforts to get rid of the non-tariff barriers?
You know, when you sit in the government, you always think that it's very good private-public relationships, because you answer all the questions, and all these business associations knows my number, and everybody can send me a message in any time. So even Ukrainian and German, we have such a platform. So we always hear problems from them, especially like problems that were mentioned before. Mm-hmm. So particular small problems, and we try to solve them. So like spare parts, we just have recently adopted bylaw that but spare parts for automotive industry. So if you have certification in Europe, mm-hmm. then you don't need to certify them in Ukraine.
And are you working on the solutions together with the private sector as well, or are you just listening?
Yeah, so that idea was came from public sector.
Okay, public.
Yeah, public or private sector.
Private sector, right?
Just writing in Facebook that see, we have a problem.
Wow.
Why don't you do anything with this? Why we need to certify it? We lose money, not much money, but we're losing time.
Okay, thank you. So now perhaps we're talking about context here, and we've heard for Ukraine, it's very much at the core of the new policy coming out. But Alejandro, perhaps you could just give us an idea of what this actually means, C notification, what sort of world, trade facilitation agreement world we're living in, what that means for countries like Ukraine.
Well, notifications, the substantial dispositions in the agreement, in the case of the developing and least developed countries, can be classified in three categories, A, B, or C. Category A is the ones that the members are ready to implement as soon as from the agreement enters into force. B, they require more time, and C requires not only time but also capacity building. And in this regard, what I have seen and what I have noticed, and I have to congratulate Ukraine because they have made their job. They have not only notified the category A, Bs, and Cs, but also they have also notified the definitive dates when they expect to implement categories B and category C. So that means that they have, and perhaps this is part of the result of the joint work that they have been doing with the private and the public sector together, where they have established a roadmap or at least a plan of action where they can identify what are the needs that they have in order to introduce the necessary reforms, whether legal or administrative reforms, and this is what they are committed to do so. And I am delighted to see that and also to confirm that they are working together. For us, the collaboration between the private and the public sector is a key issue because it is the public sector, normally they have in mind that they are doing their job in a proper manner. This is normal, this is human. We are all humans, and this is the human nature. However, the ones who are the mourners of the difficulties that they face on a daily basis are in the private sector. And what pleases me a lot in this kind of forum is to listen that it is not only the industry at the national level that is involved in that, it is also the industry from abroad that is giving an opportunity to tell through the technical cooperation and technical assistance like the German Alliance for Trade Facilitation to draw their attention and also to fix some priorities in order to solve most of the difficulties that they are facing, most of them related to NTBs. And this is important because the core of the substantive provisions in the Agreement on Trade Facilitations relate to non-tariff barriers. All those import licenses that have to be clear. Transparency is a key and capital issue. Each time we go on mission to the different members developing an LDCs, we always hear from the private sector, we need to know what are the rules that are being applied here, what are the procedures, how much they take, because this is costly to us and this is what refrains us from importing and also from being productive as much as we would like to see. So I fully understand the problems that Siemens you have and the ones that you also mentioned, because this is something that we live on a daily basis, but it's thanks to the private sector and thanks to these national committees on trade facilitation where all those issues can be solved. And moreover, through the national committees on trade facilitation, you at the level of the Ukrainians, but also you at the German level, you can bring this to the attention of the European authorities in the case of Germany, so as for them to bring those specific trade concerns to the WTO Committee on Trade Facilitation and say, listen, in this country, this provision is not being applied, or we are facing this kind of difficulties. That will allow you an opportunity to establish bilateral contact with those authorities in order to try to solve them. It has to be from the government perspective, officially, but the complaint and the concern has to come from the private sector, because you are the mourners of this problem.
Okay, thank you. And we have a wonderful case in the Alliance also in Ukraine. And so, Jochen Dechert, if I could now throw my microphone at you. Oh, that was a rubbish throw. Well done. Thank you very much. Jochen is Vice President for Global Customs and Trade Operations at BASF. So a global company coming in to Ukraine, and perhaps you just want to give us an idea of why BASF said, and you personally said, I want to be a champion in this project group.
Thanks. First of all, thanks for having us here. And it's not only me, it's together with Irina. So even that we are a global setup in the services for customs, but we truly operate really in the countries, because this is for us key success, to be very close to the authorities in the country and to the governmental agencies. Happy to hear that you're really opening up in the Ukraine to discuss and engage with us. Just a very practical example, when we first started really getting into the free trade agreement between the European Union and the Ukraine, we've been very enthusiastic. We said, great, we can get new customers in, we get faster, better lead times, we can maybe attract additional business for BASF. So we looked into the FTA, we thought we prepared everything well, because I've heard about standards, about predictability, so we did everything right. First truck arrived, Irina called us, said, oh, you know, we have the wrong documents. I said, what? Because we exactly did what is signed in the FTA. We had the right documents, right content, the proof as an AEO company, everything done. Now we need a special document to show to Ukraine customs to let the truck go in. And I would say it took us 6 to 8 months to find a way to work together with Ukraine customs to, again, getting back to standard. And it cost us a lot of, I would say, headache, a lot of overtime work, a lot of discussions. We created a special document, which we thought it's not necessary, but we did, because customer first, as we say. And therefore, I'm really happy to get in a discussion to really talk about a pragmatic way of getting, on the one hand, adhere to what is said in the contract or in the FTA, and how could we live it as an industry together with our brokers.
Irina, do you want to add anything on how working in an alliance with governments and also with perhaps more direct contacts to the government in Ukraine and Germany, how that can help get rid of those headaches?
Thank you. Good evening. So regarding our cooperation with customs authorities in Ukraine, I would like to say that the situation improved very much comparing to the situation 3-4 years ago. Customs authorities started to be really open for dialogue. We have regular meetings with customs authorities, and we really can talk and discuss everything what we need for our business. So it's really very big progress in Ukraine regarding the communication with state authorities. Regarding the implementation of free trade agreements, I would say that we had the situation when our company worked first a couple of months as like a call center for our Ukrainian customers, because not only our company, our customers, they had no understanding at all what is it, what is about. So even after I think 6-7 months after the free trade agreement came into the force, we faced the situation when we had to explain to our customers the difference between the certificate of origin and certificate OIRA-1. So I think it's the problem caused by not very well communication from the government to the customs authorities and to business. But anyway, today I have to say that everything works well regarding communication, regarding the free trade agreement, and of course we have some space for improvements. We have some different interpretation, I would say, regarding the documents which we have to provide to have conferred our preferential origin. So we have to continue our dialogue with customs.
Thank you very much. But the foundations for that dialogue are obviously very strong. Thank you so much. Now, if you could throw the microphone just 2 people away from you, next to Jochen, I've got Markus Schwenker, who is also a member of the German National Alliance. He's from the German Wholesale Foreign Trade and Services Association. And I think it would be really important also to hear your perspective on what being part of the Trade Facilitation Alliance means for you in order to get the agreement implemented.
Yes, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to speak here. I represent lots of small and medium-sized companies. We are 125,000 companies, and many of them are importing and exporting to and from every corner in the world. So I don't want to talk too much about what the Trade Facilitation Agreement means to our companies. It's basically the same as we have heard from Mr. Meyer and other company representatives here already, so I don't want to go into detail. It is certainly very beneficial for all our small and medium-sized companies if we see that trade barriers at the border in the customs area are removed. Definitely for some of our companies it's actually more important than lowering tariffs. But I would like to highlight more the political dimension of the whole of the implementation of this agreement. I think we all remember really well that by the time 2015 most of us probably thought that the multilateral approach was dead. There was nothing going on, the Doha round, and when they had reached that agreement in Bali, we saw that silver lining. At that time, I think we didn't know really what was coming. Now we are living in a completely different world. The WTO is under attack. I think Mr. Christian Vorwig spoke about it already. And I think it's important that we do a really good job in implementing the agreement to show that the multilateralism, this approach is not dead yet. And maybe this can serve as an example for the future, and it maybe will also play its part in determining the fate of the whole World Trade Organization. So I think we need to show those critics that the WTO has more to offer than dispute settlement and bound tariffs.
Thank you so much. It's really facilitating access to markets from across the world. Yeah, thank you very much. No pressure, everyone, but we've got this ambition to be a good example for the rest of the multilateral agreements. So I think so far we got a little bit of a better understanding on what sort of barriers are out there, and also how being part of this agreement and having an operational tool, the Alliance, to help implement that agreement can be very, very helpful and beneficial. But perhaps in our third session now, we should have a look more closely at this. It's almost a mantra sometimes of public-private partnership. What does that actually mean? How does it work? Why does it work? And let's first of all ask you Mattia Wigman, who's from the GIZ, that's responsible for facilitating these alliances at global level, but also at German level. And just get you to give your experience on the sort of multi-actor partnership that you've experienced. And I need to throw something at you. No, Marcus needs to throw it at you.
Is it running?
It is.
Running. Super, so multi-stakeholder partnerships.
Yeah, where do you see opportunities? How have those opportunities materialized, or is it just a sort of mantra?
It sounds very fashionable to some of us. In the Alliance we say, we work where the interest of business and government match. Also sounds very nice. The reality is a bit messier than that, I would say. And we heard some of it already, because business, it's small companies, large companies, it's national companies, multinational companies. It's businesses from certain sectors represented by sector associations, and there's chambers trying to bind it all together. There is not one voice, but various interests. On the government side, and we might hear a bit more about that later on, it's actually pretty much the same picture. We have Ministry of Trade, we have Ministry of Finance, we have Customs, we have Standards. And in some countries, the list goes on up to 30 or more agencies somehow active at the border. So that's what I mean with the messiness. But I found it deeply impressive at the final evaluation workshop in one of our project countries, where all these stakeholders sat together, and they all said the same thing. At the beginning and in between, nobody actually believed that they can make it work. But they did, towards the end. And on the one hand, increasing the security of shipments, making them faster. And at the same time, and that's a bit of the vision I have, or we have in the Alliance, creating a resilient network. Some people call it agile nowadays. It used to be resilient. And where these people can keep on meeting and keep on solving the problems they have. Because what we can do in the Alliance in one project, that solves one problem, but there's further issues ahead.
So would you agree, actually, with what Thomas said before, that it's a lot about trust building and leniency, really making sure that you actually adapt together and adapt as people?
Absolutely. So the Agora is critical, and a bit as with democracy, it might not even sound like the best or easiest way, but in the end, it's probably the solution.
Okay, thank you. Oh, all right then. No, you can pass it straight on, if you would, to Michael Kistner, who's here. He's a member of the Alliance, and he's going to catch. You don't need to. He's a great catch. I can see it. Who's here, Director of Consulting and Fundamentals at Bosch. Now, is there a value in the network? And if there is, could you explain what it is?
Yes, thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate partnerships very much, because we are convinced that it's the only reliable key for sustainable success. Things are getting more and more complicated if you are acting in cross-border business. Just an example, the transfer pricing regulations within the OECD. It's hard to fulfill the requirements, and it's a different discussion, for example, in China than in Africa, than in Europe, or all the other countries. Bosch is acting in nearby all countries in the world with about 470 subsidiaries, and thereof 270 production plants. And so this means if we have discussion about regulations, we need certainty. It's necessary to share experiences, knowledge, and to align expectations and possibilities. What is possible to do in daily work. And therefore, this platform for exchange of information, knowledge, and to get a common understanding of what the other stakeholders are expecting is extremely important for us. We appreciate this partnership very much, and we are proud to be a member of this Alliance for Trade Facilitation.
Thank you so much. And you caught that brilliantly. Could you throw it, please, to Torsten Hase? I'm sorry, he's right on the other side. You may.
I will try it.
Wonderful. I love it.
Der Fang war genauso gut der Wurf.
So Torsten Hase is with us. He's head of trade compliance at Dräger. So Torsten, another man from the first moment. Talk about what sort of value you're taking out of the Trade Facilitation Alliance.
Thanks, Natasha. Thanks for being here. It's true, I want to share that with you. It's simple. Dräger Werk is still a small or medium-sized company with only 15,000 employees. We do not have hundreds of subsidiaries around the world. We only have around 50. But nevertheless, when I talk to my colleagues in all these countries, I get the same answer. Goods are stuck in customs for whatever time frame we are talking about. The reasons might be different, but they are not that different at all. Nevertheless, it takes time, it costs money, and we are not predictable in which time frame we were able to deliver. When I ask my colleagues to contact administration in their countries, they start crying, they try to run away. You simply do not do that. Everybody is fearing repercussions coming back to them, because if you stick out, then you are prone to be the next one for an audit, for further checks coming on. The time frame is still getting longer. Working together, engaging in that alliance, helps us in the end to do something against it, to find solutions, to find projects, to work with that, and not sticking out anymore. Simply because it's a joint address from German administration, from different companies around the world, and that helps to solve issues and make things faster. And simply that's the main reason for us.
Okay, thank you so much. That makes it very, very clear as to why it's so important to go in with a team rather than sticking out with your head.
In our subsidiaries, we are about 10 to 15 people, so they are not big enough to change something on their own. But working together with the Alliance gives a possibility, at least.
Okay, thank you. Now, Torsten, could you throw the microphone to Kevin Heinreich, please? Who's
I try my best. I'm not that.
Wonderful. Kevin is representing the Association of German Chambers of Commerce and also a member of the Alliance. And we've already established that there are members of the Alliance who are enormous, like Bosch, like Siemens. Also, not actually that small, but we've got Dräger with slightly fewer people working for it. But there are also a lot of small and medium-sized companies, as we've already heard from Marcus, that are also really keen on having trade barriers taken away. So what is it that the Alliance can offer, and what's your role in making sure that their voices are heard?
Well, it's interesting to hear that Dräger is a small one with just 50 subsidiaries in the world, a very small company, I see. I want to emphasize that there are so many examples on so many levels where you can see here working together as a great example what the Trade Facilitation agreement and also the National Alliance are doing here. First of all, on the ministerial level, like the Ministry for Economic Development and the Ministry for Economy, they're working together on this project. That's not happening all the time, but here they are doing that. So this is great. And together with the GIZ, they're really setting up a project that is company-driven. They're listening to the companies, they are looking where are the problems, especially for the small and mid-sized companies, because they need the support. They don't have the capacities to work with other governments, to work with the WTO, to work with other organizations on specific issues. So they need to work together. And as the Chambers of Commerce here in Germany, we're responsible for customs, proof of origins, documents, and certifications. We are kind of like the middle ground between politics, who are like setting the requirements, and the companies who have to fulfill these requirements. And our approach is to work together on this as well. And finally, I think this is something that we need to see more in the world, especially in times where we are talking about trade wars and talking about problems, trade barriers, where we really need to work together on these issues, because we all share the same goal, so let's work together on that.
Thanks so much. Kevin, you can throw that back to me, please. Thank you. We're getting good at this, aren't we? Thanks so much. So it seems to make sense, as we've heard, to work together on dealing with existing barriers, coming up with solutions for those niggles that can really be a headache. But what I'm hearing more and more and experiencing more and more of in the Alliance is this feeling we should be thinking forward. We should be thinking trade facilitation 4.0, 5.0. So, Thomas, if I could come back to you, please, and also to the role that DHL Express and has been taking on in actually thinking forward the projects that are in the pipeline to actually have digital solutions. Can you give me an idea?
Sure. So perhaps building on what was just discussed before, I think what makes an alliance successful is that you articulate, educate, and innovate. So it's not only about focusing on innovation, or it's not only about creating new standards, but you need this magic triangle of articulation of problems or issues that were pointed out here, because that's in a way the requirements that you need to fill the pipeline of innovation. Then it's about education, as not everything needs to be in a way leapfrogged or compensated by technology from time to time. And I think we will also learn from the Montenegrin example that education is a major component to facilitate trade and make process faster. Or the Ukrainian example, which form is the right one? So no digital technology could help you, but it's just about having a proper level of education. And then at the end, it's of course about innovation in an area where the way how we handle data, we have so much opportunity to actually create the level playing field, not only for the biggest companies and the biggest countries, but in particular for the SMEs and for all these from very small to very big emerging countries. And when I take just two examples, one more on the layer of, let's say, normal business conduct, the other one a little bit more advanced and elaborated. So thinking back when I was a young guy in middle management at the Post some 15 years ago, we talked in postal clearance already about data sending of pre-arrival of data for customs clearance systems, and the question when this would become a standard or commodity. Now some 15 years later, obviously, it's still something when we talk about a pre-arrival processing, which is not fully commoditized yet, but still an achievement that needs to be mentioned. So that shows a little bit how much time it takes, although the idea is already around, when you do not operate only in closed networks, because the advantage of us operating in a closed network in DHL Express gives us, of course, a lot of opportunity to standardize systems. But in open networks, like the postal networks, or when it comes to finding the right standards for authorities, then, of course, that takes longer. So I think it's more on the articulation and education side to make incremental progress on our regular data exchange. But when we come to the more advanced and really interesting solutions, and Mr. Bartlett quoted already the example of Morocco, where we now think about applying blockchain technology between all actors involved. So the logistics companies, the authorities, and also the merchants to actually create secure transactions, ensuring on the one hand side that the proper amount of customs is paid for, so no underpayment, overpayment. Then secondly, that we have a trusted center of truth where every transaction can be relied on also from a compliance point of view. And last but not least, from a customer centricity perspective, it is all about accelerating the speed of actually clearance, and by that releasing the goods earlier and bringing it faster to the consumers. So I think that's something where in particular emerging markets, and not only talking about Africa, because I think when we talk about Europe, and I have some excellent representatives from European countries just right side of me who are not yet part of the European Union, not yet part of actually the free trade zone, their technology can be a very important in-between step before we come to a broader political type of unification. So I think that's something where data or the application of technology is of utmost importance. And again, it's something that can only work out in a public-private partnership, because we can develop the best system as long as it is not acknowledged or endorsed by WTO or by the countries involved. It is just a system. But if we make it something like in Morocco, like what we did in Montenegro together, then it can become a powerful tool that can be also leveraged, because the example from Montenegro is not only for one country, but it can be something that we now scale and leverage to other countries.
I'm going to come to the example from Montenegro in just one moment, but just to ask you about, you said we're thinking of doing the blockchain. So it seems as if there's a great tolerance for agile management. We're working together on things that we don't actually know whether it's going to work.
Well, I'm more than confident that it will work and that it will make a significant difference to the way how customs processes are handled in Morocco. When I say we are working on it, then again we come back to the multi-stakeholder nature of these initiatives. It's something where you need to bring together different players around the table, from the representatives in Morocco to technology providers, to facilitators like WTO or the GIZ, like then also us as a logistics company. And to align this one initially may take a little bit longer, but that's the prerequisite for success. And like creating open source software in the World Wide Web, which is also a protocol where others can join later onwards, and that's also an invitation for everyone to join this one. I think that's what we are working on now, but then of course it goes to execution mode because we want to see the results.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's go back to the examples. Stoyanka Mizalcevic, you are head of the Department for Customs in Montenegro, and you've been responsible for implementing the process, pre-arrival processing that we've just been hearing about. So do you want to give us an idea of what that meant for your work? Also perhaps in the question of education.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. Following up on what was just said, and before I introduce how digital solution can help to facilitate the customs procedures, I really want to thank at first German Alliance for Trade Facilitation and GIZ for invitation to this event and for opportunity to share Montenegrin experience in developing of modern IT solution for pre-arrival processing of express consignments. But first of all, I want to remind the audience that Montenegro became a WTO member from 2012, and after the trade facilitation agreement entered into force, the trade facilitation became one of the top priority of the national trade agenda. In that direction, as example in Ukraine, we established a national trade for trade facilitation. The members of that committee are various governmental bodies, governmental institutions like Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economy, Customs Administration, of course, Administration for Food and Veterinary and Phytosanitary Inspections, and of course the members of that committee are also representatives from private sector. Like Ukraine, we also adopt national trade facilitation strategy with action plan until 2023 with actions. But on the very beginning, I just want to mention what was the main motivation for Montenegro to implement pre-arrival processing for express consignments. Before the measure was implemented, the customs clearance for express consignments was based on a paper and started only after the goods after arrival of goods. Also, risk assessment was only based on the custom declaration information. Because of those factors, in that period, we had that only 25% of express consignments was released within 1 hour after their arrival. If we all know that modern businesses demand a faster delivery, it was obvious that that procedure can no longer meet the needs of traders. So Montenegro in our trade facilitation country self-assessment, we recognize this issue, and in the same time we request assistance and support for implementing the electronical solutions. So under the public-private platform of the German Alliance for Trade Facilitation, GIZ, and representatives of private sector of DHL approached the National Trade Facilitation Committee and Customs with a very planned project, and with one ultimate goal: to increase the number of express consignment that will be released within an hour from 25% to 65%. But how Montenegro find our solution for that? On the very beginning, all together decide to examine good practice. So we review practice of Slovenia, of Slovakia, Poland, and Belgium. That reviews includes not only analysis on the customs side, but also on the private and operators side. So the role of DHL was really important for that, because from them we learned the daily steps in that procedure. After that, our solution was built on several steps. First of all, we needed to amend our customs law and implementing provisions. We do it with GIZ support. They found the EU experts. Then after we create a legal base, we need to develop a proper IT solution. That solution we create with DHL representatives. We learned from them, and they learned from
That's the innovation
us.
side.
Yes. So on the end, we have a solution, IT solution, that allows that traders can lodge the documentation prior the goods arrival, and the system operate that information from that documentation goes through risk profiles, and based on that, only selected consignments will be examined by customs. So with this project, we really reached the ultimate goal, but even more than 65%. I think now it's almost 90% of consignments.
Wow, congratulations.
So we are really proud on this project. We are really proud on relationship that we built with the DHL, and we are really proud that we have opportunity not only to to share the knowledge, but only to share the responsibilities, because the main factor for success of this project was to learn how to share responsibilities, how to find the balance between the customs control on the one side and the needs of traders on the other side. I just wanted to mention that this project also use the other countries in the region.
Right.
Our success example is example for Albania, Serbia, Macedonia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, how to build their own IT solution. So I want to really thank to GIZ, to German Global Alliance, German Alliance for Trade Facilitation, and especially to representatives from DHL.
Thank you, and I think you deserve an applause for your 90% anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we've already heard that a very important part of the learning and the innovation is the scaling up of good practice, and that's exactly what we're going to hear now from Vladimir Ilic from Serbia on how this model has now been introduced into your practice, or is being introduced.
Okay, first of all, I just want to is okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I just want to state that it's a great honor to be the part of this forum, and that at the beginning I want to thank the GIZ organization and also the other company that was involved in our project of pre-arrival processing. The first, it was idea that the project was performed like that just one company, DHL, was the part of that, but the idea of the customs was that the other companies also was the part of that project. In the great cooperation with our Serbian Chamber of Commerce, we involved also the other big operators. They was the part of that project. I have to admit that in my practice, it was the first time that in that big volume, the business community was the part of some project, and believe me, the experience is really great. I just want to mention that in this moment, first, the project is finished. Maybe the better world is almost finished, because in this time we have the training for the customs officers on the new IT solution, and also next week we have the plan to start the pilot project, and I hope so in the second week of October we'll have the full implement procedure, and then I could say that the project will be almost totally finished. And also I want to mention that the main goal that we want to achieve with that project, and I'm pretty much sure that we are going to achieve that, is that 80% of the shipment which are delivered in Serbia can be released and finish all customs procedure for the 1 hour.
Brilliant. And then you'll get your applause as well. Get it now. Thank you. All right. Got it. Thank you so much. Would you like, yes, please, Thomas.
Just a quick one, because you said something of utmost importance. So, of course, it's very pleasing to hear that obviously we do a good job in supporting your countries. But you mentioned the aspect of opening up to others. And that's something I can only underline. It's not about, and that's not what our engagement is about, to create a proprietary standard, because a proprietary standard is exactly the opposite of trade facilitation. And if you think back on standardization, the sea freight container. So if the sea freight container would just have been built for one vessel operating common carrier, then obviously nothing would have changed, because it would have been limited to this company. And that's something where with some things, the good things in life, the more you share, the more you get. And I think that's about also this alliance, to create a platform where everybody is invited. And that is also the same thing then, of course, with other logistics operators.
And really everyone looking, what can I bring to the table? What are my specific advantages and benefits? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give you the opportunity now to add your voices into this, this orchestra of experiences and thoughts and ideas on trade facilitation and how we can really be a lever to benefits all over the world. So who would like to comment? Who would like to ask a question? Don't worry, I'm really good at throwing now. Who has a question? Thank you. Are you ready? And please give your, well done, name and organization, and perhaps you have a question you'd like to address or a comment you'd like to.
I do not really know whom to address this.
Oh,
I only want to
we're all
mention.
here.
So it's German Electronics Association. One of our major problems in Africa is pre-shipment controls. And I think this is from older times when European deliverers often sold older goods, substandard goods. But now the attitude has changed, and we do no more deliver to other parts of the world products that we would not deliver in Europe as well. And with the internet, customs in Africa can check whether the good is old or at a bad price. So I do not think that we need these pre-shipment controls any longer. But I have no idea whom I can address this problem. This is especially a problem for small and medium-sized companies.
Mm-hmm.
If they hear that they have to go to an office in, let's say, Hamburg first before they deliver goods, and they have the costs and the time to invest there, they simply stop the trade.
So thanks. I think the first question perhaps is also, who also feels that we don't need these pre-shipment controls? Yeah, you're not alone, sir. Okay, perhaps Alejandro has an answer.
Oops.
Thank you. Wow.
Dankeschön. The agreement on pre-shipment inspection, which is one of the non-tariff issues on which we deal with at the WTO, suffer a capitis deminutio, like we the lawyers we say. I mean, they cut to a certain extent the head of the pre-shipment inspection companies. For instance, now the pre-shipment inspection companies are not allowed, thanks to the agreement on trade facilitation, to classify the goods or give the transaction value of the goods. This is important. But at the same time, what is aligned with this situation is that all the fees and charges that are established in order for this kind of pre-shipment inspections to verify the quality or the volume cannot be adopted anymore on the basis of ad valorem price, but on the service that is being rendered. And this is something where you have to put pressure on the customs and the import administrations because they have to force all these pre-shipment inspection companies to change the way in which they are charging for the inspections that they are doing nowadays. If there is an abuse of this system, you can also bring that, discuss at the level of the national committee, or in this case, in German, for sure, you have a national committee on trade facilitation that conveys all your concerns to the European Committee on Trade Facilitation in order to fix your position and to put these countries in line with the agreement. Mm-hmm. So this will be my first reaction to your question.
Thank you. Does that help? Okay. I think this is one thing that we see at the Trade Facilitation Alliance all the time as well. It's this sort of, you know, I've been wondering about this and someone has an answer. It's great. Thank you so much. Other questions or comments? Yes. Yeah. Right at the back there. Come on, Alejandro. Let's see if you can. Watch your heads, everyone. Watch the camera. Oh, well, it can land on the floor. It doesn't break. Your name, sir, please, and your organization.
Hello, my name is Yuri Fechishin. I'm from Ukraine. Okay. I'm here by the invitation of GIZ. I cooperate with them in Ukraine. I was the advisor to the Prime Minister for 3 years on trade and taxation. So I have some experience in policy making. And my question is to the businesses here. And what interests me is what forms of cooperation with the customs and maybe with the, not with the government, maybe with the Ministry of Trade or the Ministry of Finance do you find to be working the best? Just what good examples can you name? Authorized economic operator is some sort of form of such cooperation, but maybe international trade councils is another form of possible cooperation where businesses can discuss policy making with the government. But what interests me is what forms worked for you. So what would you recommend to enhance, for example, in Ukraine?
Thank you. Should we perhaps go around the world a little bit? So if, Rita, could we ask you about what sort of cooperation in South Africa works best? Just so that also I can have a throw of the dice. Thank you. Who do we need to be working with? What works?
So what works is it still working? Okay, I didn't break it. So what works in South Africa, and I also would say in Eastern Africa quite a lot, is to really be in touch with, as companies and organizations, and large organizations obviously have an advantage, an unfair advantage almost, is to have a direct line to customs officers in country. The challenge here is though that, as I say, large operations like a Siemens can do this, but the SMEs are completely disadvantaged. So this is where trade facilitation organizations and others do work. Challenge though is when, and I don't know how one could solve this, is when a party representing many comes along in certain countries, accepted. Kenya is one of those, Ghana is one of those, but there are other countries where they go, wait, who are you and why do you want us to be engaging with you? Bring, rather send the individual companies. And I think that's where a lot of medium and small enterprises really and truly have a barrier where, and we've seen it often in South Africa as well, because people come to our offices to say, don't you want to please just lobby on my behalf? And how do you solve that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve.
It's Stephen Pope from Deutsche Post DHL. The big one, Alejandro knows, the Trade Facilitation Agreement, is the National Trade Facilitation Committees. There are a lot of countries out there that have ratified the TFA. They still don't have NTFCs. Some of them have NTFCs only with government members in them. And this is an area that we within the Alliance can play a major role on. If you're going to build trust, you need a dialogue. And as Thomas mentioned earlier on, it's about education. The NTFCs are a key starter. Yeah, as you mentioned from Ukraine, you have other associations. We have associations everywhere. But every single business here that has activity overseas should be looking to either become a member of an NTFC or encourage their partners to be members of the NTFCs. Because the NTFC is only as good as the members there. So that's something we should definitely work on.
It's almost professionalizing those that institution building.
It is. There are other initiatives. We're working on other initiatives with the German government, such as the work we're doing with Rwanda, and that's another area as well. Is the engagement of the government and the encouragement of the government. Now, Rwanda's decided to champion SMEs, and we're working on with the GIZ and the BMZ in Rwanda, and also with ITC, the International Trade Centre from Geneva. So that's another area as well that we need to look at, is the engagement of the countries. I think one of the key challenges is, of course, and we saw that here. I was previously here many moons ago in a very different capacity. I was a civil servant, and this was back in 2000. The German government didn't really engage with business. Now it's a completely different world, and we have this. So it's a journey, as Thomas mentioned earlier on. And there are a lot of governments where the only interaction they've had with business in many developed economies and least developed economies has been with a business has been trying to get involved in non-compliant activity. So moving from that to let's enter into a dialogue is quite a long journey to take, but it's based on trust. But I think that's one area where the German alliances like this play such a big role. Because when you've got a government behind you, a development government behind you, not bringing in consultants demanding so much, doing pre-inspections, but basically bringing businesses in that say, we can tell you from our own experience, and we can also share our experience with it, and then move on. I think that's one of the great things. I think one of the great things about why this alliance works is that we have Germany behind us. We have the German government behind us. Public-private partnership, yeah, and it comes with responsibility, but we have that behind us. And when you're going into a developed or least developing economy, and they're not sure what business is going to be like, obviously having a partner from a major economic power like Germany helps break down some of those barriers and is a good start to building.
Right, thank you. It's a lot about legitimizing the process. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Saved you. Thank you, Natasha. I'm Michael Krake, Director at BMZ, the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. It's encouraging to hear that you see the role of a German government in a project like this. And from my humble self-assessment, I would say that as a German government, we are actually getting better or quite good in building up alliances and platforms. You know, we have a certain convening power. We see that we can bring people to the table. Sometimes we have a moderating role. Where I see that there's still room for improvement for German government as a whole is that once we have a platform like this and we identify challenges that need to be addressed, the question is, can we fully play out our role as a German government with our instruments to really move projects? So it helps us a lot to have something like this German Alliance for Trade Facilitation, because it helps us to move from the way we do projects very often from government to government. We agree on something and then we implement it, to get the private sector perspective and to become more entrepreneurial in designing projects. It helps us also to become more concrete in actually doing something. You know, one role of government is policy dialogue, and that can sometimes take years or decades to move something. And of course, this is still very important to have the structural leverage that we have as a government. But sometimes we need to complement that with very concrete projects, the projects we've heard about here today. But my question especially to the business community here is there something that you can give as a recommendation to the German government where we can extend instruments, where we can provide new instruments to get even better in actually implementing things once we have platforms up and running?
Thomas, if I might ask
no
you
wish lists, but maybe the 2 or 3 most important issues.
Get the ball rolling, and then I'll invite other people from the audience to answer the question.
Then I give it a start. So I think we live in a time where it seems that it is all about deal making. But what we see, and also the examples we heard of, are exactly the opposite of deal making. It's more about creating stable relationships, creating trust, and I think that's in a way also the big achievement of the German government, of the BMZ, of the GIZ, that we are not talking about stakeholders coming to a country wanting to make a fast deal and then moving out again, but it's something where you have a long-term perspective. And I think that's something you shouldn't change at all, but that's exactly the right recipe for success. Additionally, and then it is the question how to create something like a new normality, in a way where countries look at it and say, I want to act in a way like Montenegro established the processes. And this is all about the lighthouse examples. And I think what we heard today, if it is Morocco, if it is Rwanda, if it is Montenegro and Serbia having followed up on this, that's the right mixture that we need. And you shouldn't change the approach. Of course, you can always do more in that area to have on the one hand side the long-term sustainable relationship making perspective in mind, while at the same time creating lighthouse examples that have the opportunity for scaling up.
Thank you very much for the long-term approach. Other voices from the industry on giving us an idea, thank you, on what it is that you need from your government partners.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Johannes Kirsch. I'm coming also from the electrotechnical industry of Germany. As we want to motivate the companies to make use of the trade facilitation agreement, there is one link missing, I think, at the moment now, and that is the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance is the head of the customs officers, and the German customs officers don't do their job in that regard, that they do not authorize the documents that they get as the documents of origin, and this makes the companies shy away from using the trade facilitation agreement because afterwards they risk to be punished with the scrutiny of the German authorities. So this is a problem that could be solved easily if we get the Ministry of Finance as an ally into the trade facilitation agreement.
Would someone from Trade, Mattia, do you want to say something? And this is a whole government alliance that we're talking about here. Correct? Correct. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Yes, good evening. As the Ministry of Finance was mentioned here, I am from the Ministry of Finance and from the Customs Division, and I had the opportunity to work on the TFA even from a Brussels perspective, as I used to work at the World Customs Organization for a couple of years. So in essence, I'm not sure if I fully got your message correctly, but I'm more than willing to reply even bilaterally a bit later on. But I can assure everybody here in the room, we were, of course, in contact with the GIZ on a couple of projects that we have now been listening to. We were in contact with DHL as well, and I think it's fair to say that it is a whole-of-government approach that we are following on, including if it is on expertise that is available, including on concrete customs, technical issues, wherever we can support the work that is on its way, we are certainly doing that. So I'm more than open also in the margins of this meeting to come back to the questions that you raised, because I'm not really sure that I got it fully.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, keep that in your... Oh, no, we've got our next
I'm trying.
Speaker. Yes, sir. Where are you from?
Hi. I'm part of the board of directors of Bitkom, but I'm here actually in my capacity for the private sector, not directly being affected by this, but many of our customers are. And I have a little pragmatic question, because we had a lot about standardization and harmonization, but I would be curious how long it took to establish the EU pallets and these things until they were actually in effect. And what I'm wondering is that don't we have a problem of actually sharing knowledge? Like, there are companies who have done successfully exported good A from country B to country C. So wouldn't we need rather a platform where all these big companies that are doing it currently can share their knowledge with SME companies, and vice versa, probably?
So first of all, is there any way, I guess, to shorten the process through knowledge sharing? And do we have those platforms like this room here? Do we have them? Is that what the Alliance is also for? That's the question. I'm seeing nodding. How can we speed up? I mean, other ideas. Steve.
Oh, has it died? No, it hasn't. You're right. One of the areas we do a lot on champion education of SMEs. We have a project in Africa, which we started in South Africa, which is called Growing Beyond Borders, where we've been educating SMEs on how to trade via the internet. It includes from customs to marketing, you name it, to everything. And it's another project, again, that we've been working on with the German government, and we're looking to expand. So in certain areas, yeah, there are definite ways of doing it. It depends which area you want to look at, how you do that. But they are out there, and you can do that. And yes, the Alliance is a forum for that.
Yeah, Alejandro, you would like to comment?
Thank you.
Well done.
No, I have plenty of comments indeed, but in that regard, I was thinking when I was listening to you and also to you and to all of you, up to which extent the German Alliance could also establish a sort of survey among the industry, among yourselves, with regard to the different kinds of NTVs that you are suffering from, because you are victims of that. And most of you have related to them in different countries and in different ways, for instance, import or export licenses. You are subject to them regardless of the goods that you are trading. This could be an issue. So a survey on all those issues could be good for you in order to set also the priorities of the German industry with the help of the German government in order to establish and define some of these special projects that you would like to put in place. And one thing that is also important afterwards would be communication. Because if you develop a certain pilot project in South Africa, which is successful, but this is not conveyed to the rest of the world, how can you share it? How can you convey and transmit and also make others benefit from all these that you have created thanks to the problems you are facing on a permanent basis? Another issue in this regard, and perhaps to extend this kind of survey, is that your main partners are the private sector abroad in the countries with whom you are trading. So also to establish, as you were saying, Thomas, a link, a relationship, permanent relationship with your counterparts in the other regions, or at this regional level, or at the regional level, in order also to push through them and make lobbies through them for the national authorities and through the national committees on trade facilitation to implement first and put and dedicate and allocate more resources and attention to all these provisions in the agreement that you are suffering because they have not been implemented. And this could be a good part for you to build a capacity building project, perhaps with limited, I don't know, let's say 2, 3, 4, or 5, but very efficient, that will address exactly what you are facing when you are trading with other regions.
Thank you. And tomorrow is the next working meeting of the Alliance, so that's something that we could definitely discuss. Thank you. Does anyone else want to share a question or a comment on where you see the Alliance currently and where you perhaps see the Alliance moving next? If not, that's my final question for this round here, our panelists, to ask you, so I think it's really important, and it's shown that we can dare to be audacious and dare to be also quite ambitious when it comes to rethinking trade facilitation. There's a lot of innovation out there, but there's also a lot of ambition that I'm hearing. So I can give you a little bit of a magic wand to say, if we were going to speak in a couple of years now, looking back on how trade facilitation has been thought differently, what's happened? What is it that we should be striving to achieve over the next couple of years? Let's go along, and I would finish with you, please. I'll start with you. You haven't spoken for a while. Yeah, let me start with you.
First, I take your proposal with me to do a survey on this kind of really barriers we see for German industry. But certainly, I would like to see trade facilitation being broadened to almost all the countries we are talking about. So far, a few countries are quite active. I think we can do more projects in these countries. And what I really like in this initiative, that specific concerns are taken from the private sector and result in concrete actions and projects being conducted by the private sector together with government agencies. And this is really a major achievement. And let me perhaps also re-emphasize what Markus Schwenke said, because I remember very well, I was there at the WTO ministerial meeting 6 years ago, and there were only a few enlightened people who saw this agreement as a silver lining. Most commentators said, okay, this is not really up to the ambitions of Doha round, so it's too marginal, this agreement. And I think when we look back in the past 6 years, this has very much changed, because people realized that the agreement is really dealing with impediments for trade, with standards and regulations, and with governance issues. And this is very important. And I think this shows that multilateralism can work, and this is also a major achievement of the agreement, certainly.
Thank you. Thomas, looking back from 2021, what is it that we really should be achieving?
So that's more the midterm perspective, but
okay, let's go further.
But it's fair enough. So I think if I take a look at the political side, then it is or will be important for us as Europeans to have even closer relationships with all parts of the world. So whatever we can do to foster free trade in Africa, whatever we can do to support the Asian countries in their way towards a more common and integrated market, to support the Latin American countries, because I think having this type of relationships, it's a prerequisite also for our role as Europe in the world, as the continent where we find the balance between sustainability on the one hand side, prosperity, economic growth and democracy, and by that we can make a contribution beyond trade. So that's on the political side. On more the day-to-day side, what we discussed about the SMEs, the big, the small countries, the big, the small companies. So to me, it's all about education, and I like the idea of if there is a platform, and I scratched my head mentally and thought, is there something like a YouTube channel of how to do international trade? And so at least I didn't see one, but if this is something where people from Ghana explain to people from Kenya how they actually did, or people from Serbia to people from Montenegro, that's something which is the power of emergence, which goes beyond actually our trade facilitation. And if there's a want or a wish in this, I think the more people speak about it, the more people share their stories and the knowledge, the more it will become something more people can benefit from.
Thank you. Stoyanka, how are you going to use this momentum created by such quick success to do further improvements and learn more also in making trade facilitation really work?
Okay, maybe it would be isn't a concrete answer for your question, but I want to use this opportunity to add something very important for Montenegro and for Serbia and other countries in the region. I just wanted to mention that we signed. We are all the part of a Central European Free Trade Agreement, and last year we signed an additional protocol 5, and we are now ready for implementation of that protocol, and that protocol will build two program of mutual recognition. One program will be addressed on the mutual recognition of IOS certificates, and the other program will be addressed on the mutual recognition of documents that is needed on clearance. So we believe that protocol will help us to build a trade facilitation on a more way that is now, but it still needs years. So we plan to do it until 2023.
Brilliant, and then we will really be excited to hear about how that works. Stable relationships we have.
You will be in love.
Thank you. Now, Dennis, what could be major new steps or major further steps, given also the political momentum that you have behind you?
It was glad to hear from private sector in Ukraine that things are getting better with customs, with international trade, but we see the big area for improvement in this area. So now we have, I hope in September we will have new laws about authorized economical operators and CTS, and then the major work will be in implementation side. So that's why we start reforming customs. So now fiscal service is divided into tax and customs, and it building completely from the beginning. So now we have only 2 employees there. So and 10,000 to be changed, not completely changed, but so we're changing procedures, changing people. We pay attention to new infrastructure, IT sector. So I hope in maybe a year and a half we will hear from our private sector that things are getting much better, and we will able to share our experience how easy and fast procedures can be.
Thank you so much, and all the best for that. Alejandro, Where's this success that the trade facilitation agreement has been? Where's it taking us to next?
Well, first of all, it is a change of mentality. And this is quite good because this is why we are discussing here with the private sector about public issues and thinking about cooperation abroad with the private sector and also how to try to help in implementing the agreement through a lot of regulations, administrative measures, structural reforms, etc., etc. So one issue that is capital is to create awareness of how good trade facilitation it is. And it is part of the educational process to which Thomas was referring to, in which I think the private and the public sector, when thinking about designing the trade policies and what would be the benefits that I will get when the agreement will be implemented, you have to bear in mind that in the case of the developing countries and the LDCs, least developed countries, they have classified the different provisions in different categories. So the implementation of the agreement will never go at the same pace. So this is also part of the awareness in order to avoid frustration from the part of the private. Yeah? So you have to look very carefully at what are the notifications they have made. Ukraine and Montenegro are fantastic examples of that. They have established the deadlines. They have also indicated the kind of technical assistance that they will need. And if you compare both of them, even though the different level of development, in some they coincide, but in others they do not. So this is important also to take in consideration. So this change of mentality has to be created not only at the level of the public sector, in Europe, in Germany, but also abroad, also thanks to the work that you can do when lobbying with your peers abroad. So this mentality has also changed in the case of the private sector. Then you also have to tell the others that they have to start to be prepared for the new trends in trade, in international trade. Here we mentioned, and the Secretary of
Parliamentary State Secretary.
Yeah, the Permanent Secretary, he also referred to the blockchain. You also referred to the blockchain. There will be a lot of advantages, and we are doing a lot of advancements in the WTO, for instance, with regard to the sanitary and phytosanitary certificates through the blockchains. Those are examples that they can rely on because in the end, they not only help to promote their exports on agricultural products, but also to protect their territories from pests that could be spread in the territory. So this is very important. Artificial intelligence also will come. When you go to these countries, in many of them, most of them, they say, but we would like some scanners in order to facilitate, in order to avoid intrusion, in order to not to injure the goods. And this could be also a solution for the pre-shipment inspections because the quality of the goods and what is inside the container can be easily, the use of robots, the use of drones, these are things that are going to come. But all this and most of these problems in not advancing in the implementation of the agreement, both in development and in developing countries, are due to one main issue that has not been addressed in full here, which is risk management. And risk management is not only related to customs issues nowadays. It's not that when you increase the tariffs, immediately the undervaluation will come. Now, the risk management is a complete set of things and of elements, and sometimes members of the countries that are afraid of, because that involves SPS, but that also involves illicit trade of licit goods. Illicit trade of illicit goods, endangered species, and many, many things that can be traded nowadays, for instance, through internet and in a very easy manner. So this concept of risk management goes in lines with the authorized operators. You cannot ask a country to establish and put in place a fantastic program for authorized economic operators if you don't have behind that, and as a basis for that, a good management, risk management system. Because nobody will trust in them, and they will continue to look at the consignments that they are importing. So those are perhaps my general. And last but not least, the National Committees on Trade Facilitations. Right. And in the National Committee on Trade Facilitations, you, the German private sector, and the German authorities, as well as the European authorities, as well as the South African authorities, the Ukrainian authorities, the Montenegrin authorities, you have to have ownership on this. You are members of that National Committee on Trade Facilitation, and you have an important role to play. And this discussion have shown to you, and your own experience have also demonstrates that you have a lot of things to say, but namely a lot of things to do.
Shared responsibility, as we heard before. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, our panelists. Thank you so much. And also all of our speakers from in the audience, prepared and unprepared. You came and had your voices heard. And I think this discussion has shown us very, very clearly that this is a successful model. It's a successful model at WTO level. It's a successful model also for the German public-private partnership that we've seen here. And I would really like to also leave you with this wonderful articulate, educate, innovate. I think that's what we have seen today. It's what we're definitely going to see tomorrow also, and in all the projects that are being implemented as we speak in the different countries. So it's an exciting field to be playing in, and you have the opportunity now of getting into some more discussions with each other. Whilst you've got a drink in one hand and something else in the other hand, you can start, if you'd like, over in this little marketplace over there. From my right to my left, you can inform yourself on the Ukrainian project with Johan Dechert, and also on the other side of the stand, Mattia will be talking about Montenegro and Serbia with the experts. Then if you move one further, you can have some general information on the alliance if you want with Philip Kuscher. Where's he? Over there, thank you. And on the furthest stand, we've got information on the Indonesian project with Gordian Fry. Gordian, where are you? Here, there he is. And on Brazil with Carl Bartels. Where's Carl? There he is. Okay, otherwise, wish you all the best to make this network really, really work the way it's supposed to and be valuable for everybody. And give yourselves a round of applause for everything you've achieved since 2016 in the German Alliance for Trade Facilitation. You've earned it. Thank you. Okay. Buffet is opened.